Kia ora and welcome to the Niggling Cast. This is the Diggity Doodah, Dr. Pepsi, Panther, Mr. Slippers, here with the Wobbly Wildcard, Aotearoa's football extraordinaire, and that means we are here to talk footballing matters with the Wildcard. We are going to touch on the Flying Kiwis. We're going to touch on the squads for the All Whites and the Football Ferns. We're going to touch on the Wellington Phoenix. And then we're also going to touch on the Premiership, which we'll do pretty much every week. So if there are some things we don't talk about, like with the Premiership or with the A-League, don't worry. It will show up again next week. And there'll be plenty of footballing discussions to be had with the Wildcard. How go thee?
I'm going all right. I'm a little, I would say, neck deep in football at the moment. Just cranking out so many words of football writing these days. It's not great for the old sleep patterns, but it's fantastic for the soul.
Good for the soul, and it's always a little I'd say it's like a massage for the soul. Hearing about our beautiful Flying Kiwis doing the football things around the world. So we are recording this late in the week, so maybe not so much like a specific performance reference from last weekend. I just want to know for our weekly kind of Flying Kiwi segment here, just a Flying Kiwis player, male or female, whose situation is tickling your taste buds right now.
Well, I reckon we might have to go back to the old well right now and head old Sarpreet Singh up for a bit of a chat. He did actually have a pretty impressive performance on the weekend. He set up a goal from a lovely little left foot wand of his, whipping in a free kick relatively early on, headed in for the first goal. He then popped up to score one himself later on, and this was for the Bayern reserves against a team called Meppen. And they were somewhere along here. His goal made it 3-1. And from 3-1, they managed to get like a red card later on, and I think they lost either 4-3 or 5-3 or something. I can't read my writing in a hurry while I'm talking, but that's all right. So, yeah, dodgy old result in the end for the Bayern reserves, but for Sarpreet Singh, that means, and I think it's 10 games now since he joined them full-time and has just been, being a prominent guy for them. There was a stat on one of those Opta Twitter account there that says Sarpreet Singh has created 18 scoring chances, including 5 assists, blah, 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 and the German Trey Liga this season, more than any other Bayern Munich 2 player, so that's good for him. He scored 2 goals, 5 assists in 10 games. It's pretty bloody excellent. He's creating all those scoring chances as well. It just goes on, like it's just carrying on the pattern of Sarpreet Singh playing really, really excellently for the reserves for Bayern Munich, where he's probably been their best player to this point. I mean, there's a couple guys who have had big games, scored hat-tricks or whatever, and there's 1 or 2 guys obviously dropping in from the first team and around there, so like it can be a little bit of a volatile situation where guys are inconsistent, young team and all this, but he just consistently himself has been rolling through quality performances, which is nice. There's been a lot less consistency at the top team, though, where Niko Kovac has been sacked this week. Or not so much sacked. They lost 5-1, I think, to someone they shouldn't have lost to. I can't remember who. But Jerome Boateng got sent off early on, didn't help matters, and then it just sort of compounded. I think it was only their second loss in the league, but they did lose the Super Cup to Bayern. To Dortmund. They had drawn to three games, I think, already in the league. So when they were winning big. But also their 2 cup games, they like their most recent cup. They're still in the German Cup, but their most recent one, they were 1-0 down with about 10 minutes to go. They had to score a couple late goals. League in particular, they've been inconsistent, and I think they're down in 3rd or something like that. And it's not an inconceivable thing that they'll just run away with the league anyway. But yeah, a lot of simmering antics there with that Bayern team and the coaching situation, and it didn't help that they've got Uli Hoeneß and Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, and one of them's president. I think Hoeneß is the club president, and the other is like director of football. And they've had a clash over Kovacs from the beginning. I think it was Hoeneß who was on Kovacs' side, and Rummenigge never really wanted him, but they came to some kind of agreement. Kovac won a lot of games and won some trophies last season. They were happy enough with that, but Hernes is retiring at the end of this year. Like, not even the end of the season, the end of this year. So that was already tipping the balance away from Kovac. And they had a bit of a chat, the meeting with all three of them. They decided, including Kovac, who was part of this decision, decided that it was time for him to step away. So, okay, that's happened, but how will that actually affect Sarpreet Singh is the question that people are wondering in New Zealand. Well, I'm of the opinion that I don't think it will. Like, Kovac liked Singh. He played him a lot during preseason. He put him on the bench for that Super Cup game. He said a lot of nice things about him, but he didn't actually play him in any competitive games. And Kovac does have a reputation of preferring like older, more experienced players, and that's probably understandable for a guy whose job was never completely 100% safe at any point during his tenure there. So you want like guys who you can at least trust, because the risk of playing younger guys is quite high for his job as much as anything. He hadn't, like, Singh had been pretty much full-time with the reserves since then. He does train every now and then with the top team, especially if, like, there's an international break or something like that, or there's injuries and they need the numbers. He'll be one of the first guys called upon, but for the most part, he's been a permanent member of the second team. He hasn't come close to getting on, like, a bench or anything like that, not even in the Cup games when there was rotated squads and stuff. He is in the Champions League squad, but he hasn't been in actually a matchday squad. So, like, there was no clear evidence that he was actually going to play anytime soon under Kovac, and a new manager might actually give him more of an opportunity to do that. So, I actually don't think it makes any difference. In fact, it could be a positive for Sarpreet Singh, particularly if he keeps on dominating at the reserve level, because he's certainly putting his hand up in that, realm there with the performances that he's bringing up for those guys.
Lovely. We'll move from Sarpreet Singh and his Flying Kiwi status to his former club, the Wellington Phoenix, who suffered a defeat to the Melbourne City on the weekend, going down 3-2. There was a little bit of drama, but who cares about the drama, because the big drama is that the Wellington Phoenix suck. How are you, like, in the simplest terms, for me, just talk to me here, Wildcard, because I'm sure there's a lot of other people listening to this who are in the similar position to me. What's going wrong with the Phoenix? Why are they shit? And how optimistic are you that things can get a bit better as the season progresses?
Well, there's a few different reasons for the fact that they've lost 4 games in a row. Like, they have a new coach, they have a largely, like, 3/4 of a new squad, they have a lot of young players, which means, like, you're going to have to deal with maybe some bad decision making every now and then, or just guys like trying to settle in. It's a lot of reasons why they might be just sort of a little bit flaky at the moment. And I think defensively that has been an issue where I reckon they've mostly looked pretty good in defense. I've seen some criticism for Luke De Vere. I thought he's been pretty solid in most of these games. Wasn't at his best on the weekend, but none of them were. That was the disappointing thing about that Melbourne City game, is we can all talk about the Louis Fenton handball, but I'm with you on that one. It's a little bit irrelevant. Like, it's not irrelevant, but it's a distraction from the bigger issue is the problem there. And the bigger issue being that, they've lost 4 games in a row, and it's not pretty. But they have only lost by 1 goal in every single one of those games. And I think this was the first time they scored 2 goals in a game, even though one was like a 92nd minute consolation, effectively, or whatever it was. But cool to see Ben Waine. I didn't realise, but of course it's true. Ben Waine's now the youngest ever goal scorer for the Wellington Phoenix as well with that goal. So good for him. Overshadowed by the rest of the happenings, but. Yeah, again, I think that might be a useful tool for the Phoenix, that, the big distraction of that handball takes the pressure off the fact that they lost another game. It's tricky. Because the thing is, I don't know that they're that far off. Like I said, they've only lost by 1 goal each time, but they're making little mistakes, and they've got to stop conceding soft goals. A lot of these goals from crosses in particular, and like... I don't know. Wally Scott had a bit of a tough time filling in for Liberato Kakache. Kakache is back now from a suspension. That helps. They're certainly a team that doesn't have the depth to be able to handle like guys coming in and out very often. It's not only a young squad, but it's also quite a small squad. So like one more reason why things are struggling. But I think we do have to give them a bit of a long leash, because it doesn't take a whole lot to push up into the top 6 if they can just go on a winning run in the second half of the season. So they do have time to build towards something, and they are building towards something. They've got guys who are doing all right, and they've certainly, for the first 3 weeks, they seem to be getting better each time. They had a drop back against Melbourne City, but maybe that's a wake-up call. So, yeah, why do they suck? All of the above, but I am, to answer the second part of your question, relatively optimistic that they can get better, but like at this point, it has to happen soon because they can't let losing become a habit, which is what happens when you start, like when you just keep losing these close games. Eventually you don't feel like you can win them. You're a goal down with 10 minutes to go and you just don't have the belief that you can get that equalizer or even to push on for a winner afterwards, like let alone the equalizer. So it has to happen soon just to get that first win out of the way, even if they don't turn into a consistent week in, week out, threatening to beat anybody on their day kind of team. But yeah, I mean, I will say that it took about 5 or 6 weeks for Mark Ruden's team last year to get anywhere near a consistent level. And when they did, they went on a big old unbeaten streak of about 8 or 9 games or something like that. The only difference there is that they managed to sort of like carve out a bit of a lucky win, or certainly a bit of a battling win in their first game of the season, which took the pressure off having to be in a situation like this with the Ufuk Talai's Phoenix are, where they've lost 4 games in a row.
To your point, there are 2 other teams, so 3 teams total, who have not won a game. You've got the Brisbane Roar, Newcastle Jets, and Wellington Phoenix. And then you have 4 other teams who only have 1 win. So, as you said, it's kind of volatile. It won't take much for the Phoenix to... it's going to take a fair amount by the sounds of it for them to get wins. But if they can get a couple wins, win here, win there, draw here, draw there... there is a path to the middle of the A-League table, which kind of feels like their ceiling, at the middle of the table.
Yeah, but that's all their ceiling was last year, though. They finished 6th and lost the first-round playoff game. I mean, there's 11 teams this year. There were 10 last year with the expansion team coming in, but like 6th last year isn't even the top half of the table. Just because they were threatening to finish 4th. They didn't. Like, 6th is dead middle. That's fine. If that's their ceiling, I'm happy with that.
It was more a reference to all these New Zealand teams competing in Australian competitions right now who have ceilings of being mid-table teams. So it's just it's a weird trend that has emerged. We'll slide into some New Zealand Premiership football. We had round 1 over the weekend, so I'll roll through the results wildcard and then I'll get a couple of answers from you to a couple of questions. Waitakere United defeated Wellington Phoenix Reserves 3-1. Southern United defeated Tasman United. Little South Island action there, 4-0 to Southern United. Hawke's Bay, they lost to Auckland City 2-3. Team Wellington 5, Hamilton Wanderers 1. And Eastern Suburbs got a 1-0 win over Canterbury United. Who offered the most impressive performance based around your kind of context of where certain teams were ranked in your own strengths and just general perception of those teams? Who offered the most impressive performance in the National Premiership round 1 wildcard?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to look at that, because based on my idea of where everybody was at, I would say the most impressive performance was that first game of the round with Waitakere coming from a goal down after about 2 minutes as well. Sam Sutton scored a beauty of a little free kick. Sam Sutton's actually a guy to have a cheeky eye out on as the Phoenix season progresses. They have a few other guys who can play centre midfield, and Sutton's pretty young still, but he's been captaining the Wellington Phoenix Reserves, and he was on the bench for the FFA Cup game earlier on in the season. So, and he's trained a fair bit with the first team. So he's a guy who's sort of on the fringes for maybe one of those, like, if there's a few injuries and suspensions later on in the season, he could get a debut, that kind of thing. But Waitakere, I was going to say with a new coach, everyone's got a bloody new coach this season, except for, I think, the Phoenix are one, Hamilton Wanderers and Southern United are the 3 teams that have kept their coach. The other 7 teams all have new coaches. But Waitakere in particular, because it was such a weird season last year where they did okay at the start and then it sort of all fell to pieces and a bunch of players left, and sounds like there was a lot of tension within the squad, and then by the end of the season they were just playing a bunch of young guys and losing most weeks pretty heavily. They couldn't defend. There were some promising players, but they just couldn't stop conceding goals. So for them to have a big first up win, considering they're mostly going with that young core again, like I think Dane Schnell scored. He's a guy I've been pretty keen to watch out for. Like he played really well for the Olympic team in qualifying for the Olympics, playing in centre mid there. So yeah, that's cool. Like the Waitakere getting a good result there, even though the Phoenix are notoriously a team, like, you know, they're a young team playing in the senior competition, even though they're playing against a lot of guys of a similar age, maybe only 1 or 2 years older than them for Waitakere. That is a nice way for both those teams to start their season, probably. But Waitakere getting a win there is a big boost and a big validation for what they're trying to build towards. Don't think they're going to be pushing towards the semis, but it's good for them to see them getting the win. But also, I have to say, like, Southern United, I expected them to beat Tasman, and I expected them to probably beat them by a couple goals, but to win 4-0 was pretty bloody impressive, because they're like, with them, it's not just the consistency of keeping the same coach, which seems like slim pickings in terms of being able to call that consistency, but like in the context of the league this year, it's not, but also it's so much deeper than that, because I think Southern had about 7 players in the starting 11 who were regulars last season, a lot of them regulars for the last 3 seasons. Like, there's that continuity is huge for them. It's the key to all their success in being able to finish 5th the last 2 years. But with teams like Eastern Suburbs and Canterbury probably dropping off a step this year, I think they are a very good bet to make the top 4, and I've been saying this all along, and I think the signing of Joel Stevens takes them above and beyond in terms of like being actual like favourites for the top 4, and to come out with a 4-0 win against Tasman. Admittedly, Tasman, again, another team who might have their struggles this season, but to win 4-1 at home, scored some nice looking goals as well. Joel Stevens, absolute star on, it's not debut because he's from Dunedin, he played for them a few years ago before he went to the Phoenix Academy, but first game back, scored 2 goals and set up another one. Fantastic little cameo from him, and I think Southern United, they've got a huge game coming up this weekend away to Canterbury United, another one of them South Island derbies, so how they go in that game I think is going to be more indicative of whether they can actually make the top 4, because Canterbury are going to be one of their main rivals for that. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that they're going to have a strong season, and they're certainly got the evidence on the board through round 1 to suggest that they will.
And who are you a little bit, like, who was just their down buzz? Like, what are you worried about from that opening round of, obviously, early days in any kind of sporting discussion after 1 week? But again, based on your knowledge of the Premiership and your knowledge of how things were set up prior to the season, what's one little aspect or result or performance that does have you a little bit worried?
I will say that I'm skeptical about how many goals that Canterbury United are going to be able to score, and they're not a team that needs to score a lot, because they've lost a lot of players who they haven't been able to replace, but their centre midfield and their centre back combination should be relatively settled, and they've got Aaron Clapham coming back, who had a couple moments against Eastern Suburbs. I thought that was probably going to be a pretty telling game, those two, because they're just like Eastern Suburbs got almost a completely new squad at this point. I think it's 4 players that were in the squad, only 1 starter from the grand final team, but yeah, tricky times. But also, it's not as much of a shift as you would think, because there are also a couple young guys who've been around the team for a couple years, so like it's not as drastic as it seems, but pretty drastic all the same. And Canterbury, while they've got consistency in that spine for the most part, I just like losing Stephen Hoyle's a big deal, and they haven't really replaced him, so there's a lot of pressure on a guy. Like, they've signed this, I think he was born in Scotland, but he grew up in Canada, and he's come from a Canadian club, a guy called Callum Ferguson, who don't know a huge amount about, because Canterbury United didn't bother doing much explanations with their squad list, whereas we got little bios on from a lot of these other teams. But I've done a little bit of research. He played for the same team as Stephen Hoyle went to when he left Canterbury towards the end of last season, so pressure on that guy to be able to do what Hoyle has done the last couple of years and just carry this team as a golden boot goal scorer. But if he can, then Canterbury United are certainly going to stay in that top 4 mix, because I think they're going to be really hard to break down. But I'm skeptical about where the creativity comes in these games. I think they might draw a few too many to to be able to put the points on the board.
You're worried about goals from Canterbury United, and I'm worried about Plunket Shield wickets from the Canterbury cricket team. We also have football, Ferns, and all white squads. So we'll start with the all whites. First thing that catches my eye here, wildcard, is the amount of countries involved. So you got USA, obviously New Zealand, South Africa, Denmark, Switzerland, Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, Germany. That's 9 different countries involved. It just shows how global Aotearoa football is, and I imagine it's the same with the football Ferns. Let me just double check that wildcard. Where is Northern Lights? Where's that from? Is that New Zealand? Northern Lights?
That is, that's Northern football in New Zealand, yeah.
Rightio, New Zealand.
It's from Glenfield.
USA, Sweden, England, Norway, Iceland, Australia, France, Germany, and Portugal. So roughly, again, I just counted on my fingers. So you've got roughly 9 to 10 different countries kind of represented in either New Zealand football squad. These are Aotearoa's greatest footballing exports in the world at the moment, and the all-white squad wildcard. Second thing that stands out for me here is just a lot of the young names that I am familiar with through how you discuss about Kiwi football. So it's great to see a young wave coming into the All Whites to support the top tier talents, because you've got Sarpreet Singh, Tommy Smith, Ryan Thomas, Chris Wood, Bill Tuiloma, Winston Reid. Like, all those dudes are basically top dog, OG, veteran All Whites, and then you've got this young wave offering a bit of life and vitality and enthusiasm to the All Whites as well. We don't need to, because you've written a full debrief, so you're all over it from a written perspective. I just want, out of the new faces, who excites you the most? Who are you most excited not to see play for the All Whites, but just in terms of the squad naming, who are you excited to see in the All Whites mix, in the conversation? Because I think there's a couple of names here that other people, more casual football fans, might not recognise at this level, and you may be able to shed a bit of light on that.
Yeah, it's a funky old squad, and it's pretty exciting for that reason, because you do have that, exactly what you're just saying, that mix of youth and experience, and you got, like, I think it's 7 uncapped players. There's 4 of them who only played under Fritz Schmidt, which was basically like a couple B team tour type things, or at least certainly like didn't involve Chris Wood, Winston Reid, Tommy Smith, Stefan Marinovic, Ryan Thomas sort of thing. And there's also 8 players who have played at least 20 caps, so it is a big mix, and it's a good thing, because we're sort of getting a bit of the best of both worlds here with Danny Hayes' first squad, where he is definitely trying to get that core of like senior guys who are going to be the key players, but he's also trying to bring through the next wave, and that was what impressed me so much with this squad. Like, my number one takeaway was just how much depth all of a sudden there is, because they haven't played a meaningful game really since November 2017, 2 years. Like, in 2 years' time, so many new players have come on the scene, and like, it's a bit of a like roll the dice. Which one of them do I want to pick as the most exciting? I mean, I'm a card-carrying member of the Callum McCowart fan club, so I definitely think he deserves his call-up. Not only just, like, there's a few guys in this team, I think Nando Peinecker, Eli Just, Max Matter sort of thing, who will certainly play a lot of games for the All Whites down the line. In terms of right here, right now, probably a bit lucky to make a squad. Like, if it was picking full-on, full squad, everybody available is here, maybe those guys don't make it, maybe they do. Like, I mean, Justin Peinecker in particular worked with Danny Hay at Eastern Suburbs, so he has a familiarity with them as well, so that certainly helps things. But yeah, in centre defence in particular, I think there's quite a lot of players who are unlucky to miss out, like Nico Boxall, Sam Brotherton type players. Even Atemi Zimopoulos, who I suspect we won't see play for the All Whites ever again, but you never know. Lots of lots of options. Callum McCallum, but definitely though deserves to be here on merit. I think at this point he's started well for the Phoenix. It's just like a matter of time until he's playing for a decent team in Europe, probably I would suspect. So definitely excited to see how he goes, because I think just with the look at this, if you look at the attackers that are in the squad, you've got like. Chris Wood leading the way, obviously. He's pretty soon to be our all-time leading goal scorer. And Marco Rojas close behind in terms of caps. I think Wood's played 56, Rojas has played 41, so 2 leaders there. The other 5 attacking players that are in contention to play in that front 3 have 2 caps between them, and that's both to Andre de Jong. So Elliot Collier never played, Max Matter never played, Cal McCow yet to play his senior international as well. So I think he actually, like a guy like McCowart, or maybe Collier gets this nudge, I don't know, but I think, well, actually, I'll come back to this idea a little bit, because I think there's another aspect to it, but Callum McCowart, certainly, in terms of this squad, has a good chance to be in a first 11, and that's pretty bloody exciting as well. And if it's not him, it's going to be Elliot Collier or someone like that, and that's equally exciting, because you're also looking at an uncapped player. But I will say, like Danny Hayes said, he wants to pick two distinct starting 11s in the 2 games, just to get as many people opportunities as he can, sort of like setting the scene, laying the benchmark for his tenure in charge of the All Whites. So I don't think we'll see a full strength team in either. I think you'll see like a mixture of of the best 11 and the rest of the 11 sort of thing. But hey, that's either way. We're actually going to get to see the All Whites play after such a long time. So reasons to rejoice either way.
As for the football Ferns, again, all the big dogs are there. CJ Bott.
Almost all.
Sarah Gregorius, Betsy Hassett, Annalie Longo. Familiar names for our casual fans. Hannah Wilkinson, Rosie White, Rebecca Stott, Ellie Riley, Rhea Percival, Erin Naylor. No Abby Ursig by the looks of it there, wildcard. What's the deal with Abby Ursig?
Personal circumstances is the official term as to why she's not been picked. I mean, I'm not going to speculate on what personal circumstances might mean, because that's none of my bloody business. But I will say that if there was a situation of just like trying to say, well, she kind of needed a rest, then I would 100% have been down with them just saying, well, she needed a rest. Like, she just finished a long and grueling club campaign with the North Carolina Courage, captained them to a 2nd straight championship. In the middle of that championship run, there was also the World Cup, which she went and played all 3 games for New Zealand. The toll of that physically and emotionally, and then coming back, picking up where she left off, like, it's been a long year for her, and a little bit of a break it doesn't go astray. I think it's not a terrible idea for her as much as anyone else, certainly in the squad, needs a break. And it's just a little bit unfortunate that it also coincides with the fact that Michaela Moore is still a few months away from returning from the injury she got before the World Cup. Anna Green is injured. It means we do have a little bit of lack of depth at centre back all of a sudden, but that's, these are friendly games effectively, and that's an opportunity for people like Claudia Bunge and Nicole Stratford to potentially get their first caps and show what they can do at an international level.
Which of these local players are you most intrigued about? You got Lily Allfield from the Northern Lights, you have Claudia Bunge from the Northern Lights, and Sarah Morton from Auckland Football. Everyone else is...
And Steph Skilton as well from Auckland.
Yes, Stephanie Skilton from Auckland Football. Everyone else is with professional clubs around the world. So who is most enticing from that group of players picked up and selected out of local footy in Aotearoa?
Well, Lily Allfield's interesting because she hasn't been in a squad for 4 years, I think. She hasn't been capped, but she did make the squad a while back. However, I don't think she's going to play because she's clearly the 3rd string keeper in this team, and they've only got 2 games. So even if they do want to rotate Erin Naylor out, it'd be Vic Essen who gets the nod, next in line. Steph Skilton is in there as a defender as well, so she might get a go at centre-back, which would be interesting. She captains Auckland. She's been around the squad for a little while now. But I would say, and Sarah Morton is in a similar situation where she's not really close to first choice at playing as a fullback, which is a position we got a lot of strength and depth in at the moment. But she has been getting around a lot of squads recently, so she is becoming a little bit of a regular, certainly within the wider group. So I think Claudia Bunge getting her first opportunity, someone who's, played well for the under-20s in the past and been playing extremely well for Northern Lights this season and in recent seasons as well. So I think she's someone who has the potential to go on to a professional career. She's only, I think she's about 20 or 21 or something at the moment, so certainly heaps of time on her side. So Bunge is definitely a player who could go on to a big career and get in this opportunity now at a time where she's probably going to get some game time because of the state of the centre-back combos. That's pretty interesting, I think. That's pretty exciting to watch out for.
Who are your two centre-backs then in a top strength lineup?
Top strength, like everybody available?
Well, from the squad.
I think if everybody was available, it would be Urseg and Stott. However, you might be playing Stott at right back to get Michaela Moore in there as well, just for the balance of the team. And that's where it gets tricky, because Stott is far and away the most comfortable centre back in the squad, and everyone else is sort of like on the fringe there, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they'll do. I expect everyone might get an opportunity. I think probably just for experience sake and all these things, I'd probably lean towards Nicole Stratford and Rebecca Stott in the first game. But it depends. Like, they might just want to mix it up and give different people opportunities to show and like say, well, we don't know who the next best centre back is. We're going to let you guys decide it by like your performances on the field. As
it should be.
Yeah, as it
should be.
Which is actually, like, that's the one other thing I want to say about this squad is if you look at the World Cup and the things that went wrong at the World Cup, the number one problem was that they just couldn't be relied upon to score goals. They couldn't create enough chances. They didn't put away the chances they had. They scored one goal. It was an own goal, and like with 10 minutes to go in their entire tournament. There was a lot of reasons why that might have been. Like, Sarah Gregorius was out of a club, Rosie White was out of a club. Both of them were playing men's grade football, I think, in Wellington, so not professional women's football at the time. Hannah Wilkinson had literally just got back to fitness from a knee reconstruction, so... and then who else did we have? Emma Kete was the other one, and she had come out of retirement to make the squad. So there's a lot of excuses why the strikers were going to be under strength, and it was clearly an area we didn't have a lot of depth in as well, and which is why I was disappointed that players like Katie Rood and Amy Phillips weren't given the opportunity to be in that squad, especially at the expense of, like, not to be too rough on Emma Kede, but coming out of retirement for that tournament at that time when the rest of your strikers are already a bit compromised was probably a little bit much, but that was kind of the way that Tom Samani went with that squad, was he leaned on players who had been there before, and it didn't work. So he now has less than a year, 7 or 8 months to the Olympics to sort out how we're going to be able to score goals against top teams. Since then, Rosie White has played the second half of the season with the Seattle Reign, scored a couple goals there, mostly playing in midfield or as an attacking midfielder, not as striker, but still, putting goals away. Katie Rood just scored a blinder on the weekend for Lewis in the second division. Well, actually, it was in a cup game against Chelsea, so there you go. Sarah Gregorius has gone to take up a non-playing opportunity as a... something or other, doing something for FIFPro, for the International Players Union, which is an incredible opportunity to take up, especially for a New Zealander to be getting a role like that. It does mean she's without a club at the moment. She has said she's committed through to the World Cup, and so Samani's still leaning on an experienced player like that. But Hannah Wilkinson also playing professionally in Portugal at the moment with Sporting and scoring goals there as well. So for the most part, the strikers that we had at the World Cup, Emma Kete's not in the squad, by the way, and Katie Rood has come in to replace her. For the most part, we are sticking with the players who were starting and getting the most minutes at the World Cup, but they are, most of them, in better positions, like better situations, and with fewer excuses, and, it's a thing to watch out for, I guess, because Samani is doing the same thing and showing consistency, but he's also showing a willingness to amend the things that went wrong and hold players a little more accountable. He said we need to challenge the top tier players who are all, excellent players. A lot of players who've played 100 caps in this team have been around for ages, been great servants, but haven't always had a lot of squad depth, because it's been like, if you play professional, then you're in the squad because you're there, and whether you're playing a lot for club level or whatever. So I think those are all things to be focused on, rather than the results, which I don't think matter at all in this little like friendly tournament that they're playing. 2 games, one against China, the other against either Brazil or Canada. Doesn't really matter if they win or not. It's more about if they can show what they're capable of and show that they're building towards the Olympics and being able to do a better job at the Olympics than they did at the World Cup, pretty much.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Bit of an improvement. We will stop there, wildcard, and that would be all for another episode of a football newscast. If you made it this far, shout out to you. Thanks for listening. The newscast is on Patreon, so you can support us straight up the guts. The Route 1 ball into the box.
Into the mixer.
Is what I would say on a football podcast. So yeah. Hit us with that Route 1 ball into the mixer, and we'll get a head onto it. Maybe a toe poke as well, if I am in front of goal. So, yeah, just keep an eye out for that Patreon link, and that's the best way to support us. Otherwise, just like it up, share it with your homies, and, stay beautiful. Help each other. Raise your mana. Kia kaha.